Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on, well, a really fascinating journey.
Hmm.
We're exploring the profound and maybe unexpected connections between two powerful worlds.
Right.
On one hand, Carl Jung's analytical psychology, and on the other, the spiritual framework of addiction recovery, specifically Alcoholics Anonymous, or AA.
Yeah.
We've pulled from quite a rich stack of sources for this deep dive, detailed explorations of Jungian theory, historical accounts, even Jung's own letters.
And our mission today, really, is to unpack how Jung's idea of the shadow archetype, well, how it offers this potent psychological model
A mox for what exactly?
for understanding addiction, the core mechanism, and also the transformative process you find in the 12 steps. It's a story that actually starts with a specific historical meeting, one that kind of laid down the intellectual, spiritual DNA for a global movement.
Okay.
You might discover some surprising depths, how these frameworks, often studied apart, really illuminate each other. It gives a new dimension to understanding self-actualization.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Before we dive straight into addiction, we need to get a handle on this core concept. What exactly is Jung's shadow archetype? It sounds, well, a bit mysterious.
Right. Well, in Jungian psychology, the shadow is fundamental. It's an archetype.
Okay.
Think of it as the unconscious parts of our personality. The bits the conscious self, the ego, finds unacceptable, or maybe just contrary to how it likes to see itself.
Like a blind spot.
Exactly. It's often called the blind spot of the psyche. It's
Yeah.
like a container for traits, impulses, experiences we've pushed down, denied.
So what kind of things?
Oh, it can be anything. Simple things like mental laziness, maybe, or more complex qualities that just don't fit our self-image, what Jungians call ego dystonic.
And why do we repress them?
Often it comes from social conditioning, family dynamics, maybe trauma, situations where parts of us might have been shamed, assertiveness perhaps, or creative attempts.
Okay.
And this repression, it leads to this state of psychological fragmentation. The conscious self ends up living through a persona, but it costs us our vitality.
So, hearing shadow, I immediately think dark side. Is that basically it? Just our negative traits?
That's a really common misconception, and it's important to clarify.
Okay.
While, yes, it does contain traits we might label negative, the shadow is more accurately, I think, a reservoir of unacknowledged potential.
Potential, both good and bad.
Exactly. Both destructive and constructive elements. It's not just human darkness. It's also the seat of creativity, vitality, renewal.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Someone with, say, low self-esteem might actually have hidden positive qualities stored away in their shadow qualities they just can't consciously recognize or access. So the goal isn't about becoming morally perfect. It's about psychological wholeness. Confronting and reclaiming these repressed parts, that's key to living a more effectual life.
And if you don't?
Well, the inability to integrate them, that perpetuates inner suffering. It keeps us fragmented, hindering that move towards wholeness.
Okay, I can definitely see how that internal conflict, that fragmentation, would be distressing. So what happens? How does this unintegrated shadow show up? Especially concerning destructive behaviors, like addiction.
Well, when the shadow stays unintegrated, its autonomous qualities can exert a really powerful, often destructive influence.
How so?
This psychic imbalance, it can manifest in different ways. Maybe a feeling of meaninglessness, sometimes illness, even unconsciously provoked accidents.
Yeah.
But the most direct, the most compelling manifestation, like you said, is often addiction.
Why addiction specifically?
An unintegrated shadow creates this profound inner sense of being broken, fragmented. And with that comes a desperate longing for psychic wholeness.
Right.
And Jung saw that substances like alcohol, they don't just numb you or change your mood, they fundamentally alter the inner world.
Oh.
Alcohol can provide this illusory wholeness.
Yeah.
It temporarily blurs the boundaries of the ego, merges those fragmented parts for a moment.
A false sense of completeness.
Precisely. A false, fleeting sense of being whole. And for someone suffering from what Jung called a spiritual thirst for wholeness, that feeling can become something they obsessively chase.
So the addiction isn't the root problem.
In this view, no. The addiction is more like a misguided attempt to find a solution to the underlying problem of fragmented psyche. Jung really reframes it. It's not just weak willpower. It's a deep, though misdirected spiritual quest.
That reframing is, yeah, it's really powerful. Changes how you look at it entirely. So this sets the stage then. How did these deep psychological ideas actually make the jump from Jung's theory into the practical world? into something like AA.
Right, and the connection isn't just, theoretical overlap. It's rooted in a specific pivotal historical event.
Okay, tell us about it.
So, in the early 1930s, Jung was treating an American patient for alcoholism, a wealthy man, a former state senator named Rowland Hazard.
Okay.
Hazard went through about a year of Jungian analysis, believed he was cured, but he relapsed pretty quickly.
Oh, dear. So he went back to Jung.
He did. He returned, asking for more treatment.
And what did Jung say? This feels like a crucial moment, especially for a prominent patient who'd invested so much.
It was critical. Jung actually refused to continue the analysis.
Refused? Why?
He told Hazard that, from a medical and psychological standpoint, his case was hopeless.
Hopeless. That's blunt.
Extremely. But then Jung said his only chance for recovery was to have a vital spiritual or religious experience, what Jung termed a genuine conversion.
A spiritual experience.
Yeah.
From Jung, the psychologist.
Exactly. Jung admitted these events were rare, but he saw this kind of transformation as a psychological phenomenon powerful enough to counter the destructive pull of addiction.
That's quite an admission for a scientist.
It was an act of profound humility, really, admitting the limits of his medical science, saying the solution lay in the spiritual realm, and that diagnosis of hopelessness. While many people in recovery say that's a necessary step, it's the psychological equivalent of hitting rock bottom. It forces surrender.
So Jung basically pointed beyond psychology itself.
He did, suggesting that spiritual transformation was the answer where his science couldn't reach. That was the aha moment.
So this hopeless diagnosis, this humility from Jung, that became the spark.
Absolutely. It became this unlikely catalyst. Following Jung's advice, Rowland Hazard actually went looking for that spiritual transformation.
And did he find it?
He did. He found sobriety through a group called the Oxford Group, which was a Christian evangelical movement at the time.
Okay.
And then, crucially, Hazard carried that message, the idea of a spiritual solution, to his friend, Ebby Thatcher, who was also deep in alcoholism.
Passing it on.
Exactly. And Ebby, in turn, passed the message to his old friend, Bill Wilson, who is really at the end of his rope.
Bill Wilson, the co-founder of AA.
The very same. That meeting between Ebby and Bill and the spiritual awakening it triggered in Bill Wilson, that ultimately led to the founding of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Wow. So Jung's initial diagnosis, given to one man,
became a cornerstone, a central idea, and a program that's helped millions. It shows how one act of maybe medical honesty can ripple outwards.
incredible. And decades later, Bill Wilson actually wrote to Jung, right? To thank him.
He did, yes. In 1961, not long before Jung died.
What did that letter and Jung's reply reveal, now that AA was this huge thing validating Jung's advice?
Wilson wrote crediting Jung's diagnosis of Rowland Hazard as absolutely critical in AA's formation. Jung apparently hadn't known Hazard recovered or about the movement that followed.
Really? He didn't know.
Seemingly not the full story. He was deeply gratified, apparently, and replied immediately. And his letter, though short, is incredibly profound.
That's so?
It really encapsulates his whole perspective on addiction as a spiritual issue. It bridges that gap between abstract psychology and the raw, lived experience of addiction. It confirms that shared understanding about needing a fundamental psychic shift.
So beyond just confirming the history, what was the big idea Jung put forward in that reply? Anything surprising?
I think his most profound statement in that letter was that the alcoholic's craving for alcohol is, and I'm quoting loosely here, the equivalent on a low level of the spiritual thirst of our being for wholeness.
Wow. Spiritual thirst for wholeness.
Yes. That statement defines addiction not as some moral failing, but as this misdirected, desperate attempt to satisfy a fundamental human need, a longing for psychic and spiritual completeness.
Because the person can't face their own fragmentation.
Exactly. Unable to confront the unintegrated shadow, they reach for a chemical substitute that gives a temporary, illusory sense of unity. So the insight is clear. Addiction isn't just about willpower. It's a tragically misguided search for a spiritual experience, for wholeness.
And didn't Jung use a specific phrase in that letter?
Something?
Latin?
Ah, yes. He concluded with a very powerful, almost poetic phrase, spiritus contra spiritum.
Spiritus contra spiritum. Sounds like a secret formula. What did he mean?
Well, the Latin word spiritus is fascinating. It has this built-in paradox.
Oh, so?
It can mean spirit in the sense of life-giving force or religious experience, but it can also mean a highly volatile liquid like alcohol, spirit.
Oh, spirit against spirit?
Exactly. That's how it's often translated. Jung's formula means that the depraving poison, the alcohol, the spiritus, is actually a symptom of an unfulfilled spiritual need.
Oh, okay.
So the cure, therefore, isn't just to fight the substance, the bad spiritus. It's to provide a genuine, authentic spiritual experience, another form of spiritus that's equally potent.
So you replace the illusion with something real.
Precisely. The groundbreaking idea is you don't just fight the substance, you replace its illusory spirit with a genuine, constructive spiritual force. It's like an inner alchemy, reorienting that fundamental human drive away from destruction towards wholeness. It's not about subtraction, it's profound substitution.
That really is a paradigm shift. Viewing addiction as a misdirected spiritual longing, does that suggest that maybe approaches focus only on stopping the substance or missing something vital?
It certainly implies that, yes.
And did Jung, in that letter, also touch on the importance of community? Because AA is so much about fellowship.
He did, absolutely. He underlined the importance of community. He stated something like, "An ordinary man, isolated in society, cannot resist the power of evil."
Evil being the addiction, or the shadow's pull.
Probably both, the destructive forces. And he said this force must be counteracted either by real religious insight or by the protective wall of human community.
A protective wall.
Yes. And that statement directly validates the huge role of fellowship and mutual support in AA. He saw community not just as, nice social support, but as a vital spiritual and psychological defense against isolation and the collective shadow.
So abstinence alone often isn't enough. You need that spiritual dimension in the community support.
That seems to be the implication, yes.
Okay, putting all this together, it really makes the 12 steps of AA sound like, like a practical guidebook for doing Jungian shadow work. Is that fair? How do the steps actually guide someone through this?
That's a very accurate way to put it. Precisely. From a Jungian viewpoint, active addiction is essentially a time of unconscious behavior. It's driven by the shadow.
Yeah.
The individual has sort of ceded control to these subconscious forces, avoiding confronting those hidden, difficult parts of themselves.
So how does recovery start in this model?
The recovery process often begins with what can be called an ego collapse, that rock bottom moment we talked about.
That moment of surrender.
Yes. For many, it's this profound, ego-shattering realization of complete defeat, powerlessness. And that experience is a direct psychological parallel to what Jung called ego collapse at depth, which he saw as necessary for that vital spiritual experience.
So rock bottom opens the door.
It forces the surrender of self-will, which is the spiritual foundation. And then the 12 steps offer a structured process to build a new, more integrated psyche on that foundation.
That's a powerful parallel. Can you walk us through some specific steps? Show us how they map onto these Jungian ideas. That would be really helpful for, visualizing it.
Certainly, the 12 steps provide a remarkably clear pathway for this integration.
Okay.
So, step 1, we admitted we were powerless. That aligns directly with ego collapse and humility.
Right, the surrender.
Exactly. Surrendering the ego's illusion of control, breaking down the persona that addiction often creates, and making space for real self-discovery.
Makes sense. What about steps 2 and 3?
Steps 2 and 3, came to believe, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over. These relate to the shift to the self and trust in a power greater than the ego.
Moving beyond just the self.
Yes. Acknowledging the ego isn't enough, that spiritual healing is needed. It begins that spiritual journey towards connection with something deeper, maybe an internal guiding force, the Jungian self.
Okay. Then the inventory steps.
Yeah.
4 and 5?
Yes. Steps 4 and 5. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being. This is confronting and acknowledging the shadow head-on.
The core shadow work.
Absolutely. The inventory brings unconscious shadow stuff into awareness. And admitting it, especially to another person, breaks the isolation and shame that keep the shadow repressed and powerful.
Crucial steps. Then 6 and 7.
Steps 6 and 7. We're entirely ready, humbly asked. This is about the willingness to integrate. It's that humbling process of letting go of the ego's attachment to its defects, its familiar flaws, moving from just knowing about the shadow to actively working to integrate it, release its destructive grip.
So readiness and asking for help, essentially.
No. Then steps 8 and 9, made a list, made direct amends. These address repairing projections and interpersonal harm.
Cleaning up the wreckage.
Exactly. Taking responsibility for the harm caused when acting out the shadow's contents. Directly facing the consequences of living with an unintegrated psyche.
And the later steps, 10 and 11.
Steps 10 and 11. Continue to take personal inventory, sought through prayer and meditation. These speak to the conscious maintenance of individuation.
Keeping it going.
Yes, ongoing practices. Mindfulness, self-awareness, introspection, all to prevent the shadow from quietly taking back control. maintaining that integrated state.
And finally, step 12.
And step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening, we tried to carry this message. This beautifully embodies the Jungian archetype of the wounded healer.
The wounded healer.
Yeah, it's the culmination, where your own suffering, your own journey through darkness and integration becomes a source of healing and understanding for others. It also reinforces your own recovery through service and that shared experience.
That's such a clear and profound framework. It really lays out a complete journey of transformation.
It does.
So what does this all really mean for the person in recovery? Thinking beyond just, not drinking or using. What's the deeper Jungian shift happening inside?
Well, the outcome of really working the 12 steps, viewed this way, is this profound psychic transformation. It goes far beyond just abstinence.
How so?
The journey guides a person from that state of psychological fragmentation, demoralization, towards honesty, emotional stability, real self-awareness.
Integrating the shadow.
Exactly. Integrating the shadow through the inventory and the amends, it expands consciousness. It actually releases huge amounts of psychic energy that were previously tied up in repression.
Energy for what?
For life. That liberated energy can then be channeled into creativity, authentic relationships, a renewed sense of purpose. It leads to what Jung described as returning to the feeling of living your own life.
Moving from unmanageable to purposeful.
Precisely. From a life driven by subconscious forces to a conscious, purposeful existence. The real aha here is that recovery isn't just about stopping something negative. It's actively becoming someone new, someone whole.
That's a powerful distinction. Now, it sounds very personal, this internal transformation, but you mentioned Jung talking about the protective wall of community earlier. Does this transformation have ripples for the group too?
Oh, absolutely. The principles definitely extend beyond just the individual. Think about AA's 12 traditions.
The guidelines for the groups themselves.
Right. Those traditions, which govern how groups operate and relate to each other, they're like a practical defense against the collective shadow.
The group shadow. How does that work?
Well, things like ego, power struggles, division, these can plague any group. The traditions, like emphasizing unity or anonymity, placing principles above personalities, they directly counter the collective shadow's tendency towards things like scapegoating or internal conflict.
So AA provides that protective wall for the individual.
And it also models how a community can try to function harmoniously by actively managing its own collective shadow. It's quite sophisticated psychologically.
And the whole idea of carrying the message, step 12 again.
Yes, the entire recovery movement with that emphasis on carrying the message, it's a living embodiment of that wounded healer archetype we talked about. Transforming personal suffering into healing and purpose for yourself and for those you help.
This deep dive has it's shown such a clear, compelling link between Jung psychology and the spiritual heart of addiction recovery. The shadow concept isn't just some abstract metaphor. It feels like a real psychological blueprint for understanding the forces driving addiction.
Yeah.
And the 12 steps emerge as this structured, almost elegant method for confronting and integrating that shadow, aiming for genuine wholeness.
And it started, in a way, with Jung's profound humility. Admitting his science had limits, but having this deep insight into the human spiritual condition, that provided the kind of intellectual DNA for a movement that offers this map for what really is a heroic journey.
From fragmentation to wholeness.
Exactly. So maybe the question for you listening is, how does understanding this concept of the shadow shift your perspective on maybe your own personal struggles or even wider societal issues? And what unacknowledged potentials, positive or negative, might be waiting in your shadow, ready for you to reclaim and integrate into a more complete self?